Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to episode 41 of the podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Steve Wellings. Steve, so this Saturday, Muratalla takes on Andy Cruz in Las Vegas. Muratalla recently being upgraded from interim champion. I don't know, I guess you could say defending his title, though he's just been, even though he's just been, upgraded. He beat obviously Abdullayev to get that title. But look, we have two unbeaten fighters, two in the prime of their careers. It's fair to say, Murataya 29, Andy Cruz 30. Um, and yeah, both obviously haven't lost in the professional ranks. What's your initial thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I think I agree with you when you say about it's kind of like I think it's a bit of a coming out party maybe for Andy
Mm.
Cruz. I know that might sound a little bit disrespectful, but it does. Muratalla is the champion in that, but I mean Cruz is only 6-0, Muratalla is 23-0. But I would say Cruz is likely the favourite to win, and Muratalla has effectively inherited the belt. He is the technical champion. He's coming in defending it, but it feels to me a bit like a vacant title bout, and
Mm.
I was reading in the build up and that, and the build ups, they're not trash talk with these two guys, really. Eddie's calling it a 50-50 fight, but I don't really think he believes that. They're expecting Cruz to win, they're backing him, they finally won a purse bid. Moritai is a good fighter, it'd be disingenuous to suggest he doesn't have any chance whatsoever. And Cruz is relatively inexperienced as a pro, so you just don't know, comparatively speaking. But I think it's Andy Cruz's fight to lose, to be honest, Dan.
Fair enough, and that's interesting what you said about Matchroom finally winning a purse bid because you're right. I feel like they always lose purse bids all the time, and I was listening to other channels and they say that the way Matchroom is run is like very much like, obviously Barry Hearn's an accountant and stuff, and I think they are very much by the numbers. If it doesn't make, if they're not going to make money from it, they basically won't put the money in kind of thing. And we've seen that time and time again, but for whatever reason, they see this one as, financially beneficial and also, yeah, they obviously seen something in this fight to kind of actually go ahead and actually win the purse bid. Muray, I think it's fair to say, has been mainly promoted by Top Rank so far.
Mm.
So yeah, Cruz against the home fighter, even though it's Muratalla versus Cruz, as we mentioned, Muratalla defending the title. You mentioned obviously Muratalla being a good fight. Is this a risky fight at all for Cruz? Because I don't know, for me, this is reminding me a little bit of when Vasyl Lomachenko first turned pro. And I know Lomachenko he faced Salido's second fight and he ended up losing. And we've seen this in the past with these guys who've had a very good amateur career. Cruz, obviously former Olympic gold medalist, I think had 140 wins. A stellar amateur, basically, arguably one of the best of all time. And 6 fights in, he's fighting for a world title against, on paper, a guy who's got 17 knockouts and hasn't lost a fight. You know, is there any risk? I know you mentioned that it'd be disrespectful to Muay but is it more of a risk than maybe than yeah? Is it a risk basically for Cruz?
Well, it is a risk, and you'd like to think it would be a risk because whenever you get to this level, fights are risky because you need to win a world title. You're going to have to take a certain element of risk, and that's the same for both of these guys. He was mandated, Cruz. He's 30 years out of age now, and Muay is 29. It's time for these two guys to both start taking risks. And you're right, at Top Rank have promoted Muay Thai. He did very well around the sort of bubble time in boxing, around the COVID bubble and that, and he sort of came into his own. And he's shown himself to be a very competent fighter, but I think Top Rank they put in a bid of like $550,000. I think it was just a bit of a test the water bid. There was only them and Matchroom who bid for it. Matchroom put in, I think off the top of my head, it was like $888,888 or some crazy bid like that. But it's almost like Top Rank aren't in that financial position to back guys like Murataya now. If they still had the ESPN deal and Bob was still firing on all cylinders and everything was rosy over there, I'd say they might have tried to have gained a home advantage for this one. But I think Cruz has got to take a calculated risk. I expect him to pick up the title. And then Hearn is looking to position him really, I think, for future fights without necessarily looking past Murataya, which they obviously won't do. I think they're looking at guys like your Schofields, your
Mm.
Stevensons, your Masons, maybe not Tank. God knows what's happening to him. Keyshawn's moved up, Lopez. But I know they're not maybe not the same kind of weight, but they're looking at those names down the line to position him at lightweight and for a push against these kind of guys. and I think that's why he wants to snare this title at this time.
Well, I gotta say, Steve, I was unaware of those figures. I mean, 800,000. That's not a big purse, is it? That's a very low purse. That's probably one of the lowest I've heard for a world title fight. To be fair, that's tiny for a world title fight. I guess that's testament to, both guys not really being massive names. Cruz, despite his talent, yeah, he's not a massive name, yet. But like you're saying, a world title is often the actual catalyst for the bigger names and the bigger nights, and that's when the money starts to come in. Really, when you have that world title, it's almost like I don't know what the metaphor is, but it's just I don't know, it just adds dollars to your purse, basically. So it does make sense, and that's possibly why Matchroom are just taking a risk. And yeah, I mean, and maybe that's why they actually won it because $800,000, I like to think for Matchroom isn't much for $1 billion company. So they thought, you know what, it's worth the risk. Cruz is a top talent. They must be fancying their chances here. According to the bookies, yeah, Cruz is a massive favorite. Like, it's not really close at all. Are you surprised at all? It's a little bit, not even a little bit closer, considering Murataya's, I don't know, his career so far in the pro ranks.
Possibly, yeah, but the bookies, I'm not a betting man myself, but the bookies don't tend to get it wrong too often. So maybe that's just a representation of the fight and what they think is going to play out. And Cruz being in a prime spot at lightweight, well, the winner, whoever the winner is, will find themselves in a really nice position moving forward around the 135-pound weight class and beyond. And the bookies obviously see Andy Cruz as being that man, so they're positioning him, therefore in that prime spot. And like I said, they don't often get it wrong, so maybe they're just seeing similar to what we seem to be seeing, and that Cruz, it's going to be a bit of a coming out party for him. I think it'd be an interesting fight down the stretch, actually. Be interesting to see what both guys have got, because that's why these fights are 12 rounds. They're championship fights. It shows the difference between the amateur game and the pro game. Not that I'm suggesting Cruz has shown any issues so far with going the distance or anything like that. He's transitioned lovely, very smoothly into the pro game. But back to your original point, I think the bookie's probably just seeing what we are, and they're maybe just a bit more brutal than the promotional hype of calling it a 50-50. They're like, yeah, we see Cruz as the favourite, and that's the way we're marking it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm a little bit surprised. I guess when there's two unbeaten fighters, I always find there's a little bit of like unknowns there. But I guess with Wendy Cruz, we know what he's about. We know this is a very talented guy. One of the best amateurs of all time. So yeah, I guess it's not surprising. What I will say about the bookies, I did remember last year, a few fights where there was like a really steep favorite, and then it ended up going the other way. Come to mind, I think Fabio Wardley versus Joseph Parker. I know the heavyweights is always more. There's always more possibilities of upsets because that's why it's such a exciting division. And if there was another fight which was like really, the boogies had it really strong into one guy and then it went the other way. But you are right. I think most of the time the bookies are correct. They know what they're talking about. Um, I guess yeah, it remains to be seen. I suppose I just find it a little bit strange how through someone of six fights, can already be so, I guess so highly touted over someone who's I don't know more maybe a little bit more experienced in the pro ranks. Uh,
Regarding Wardley as well, though, I suppose if you look at it really, they could have had him away. I don't know which way it was veered, but if it was in Parker's favour, you could argue that when Wardley put it on in that last round and got the job done up until that point, the bookies could, it could be argued that they were right. Maybe Parker was winning the fight. You know what I mean?
that's true. That's true. I mean, I think he was on up on the scorecards, I think, but as we've seen of Wardley, he's an example of a fighter who, you can never count out to the last minute. And unfortunately, I guess with the lower weights, there's less chance of that happening, really, isn't it? If we're being honest, it can happen. It can happen. There can be a knockout punch, change the fight. But the skill level is a lot higher, isn't it, with the smaller guys? So it's less slip ups, and I think more often than not, it's the more skillful guy actually wins at the lower weight class. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think yeah, when you're more skillful at the low, yeah, you got more better chance of winning. There's less of an equalizer there, I think, compared to like the higher weight classes.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like they're rhythm fighters in answer to, yeah, I think that's a good point. They're getting to real good rhythm, especially down the lower weights. I mean, see guys like Ricardo Lopez and
Mhm.
Who was the Puerto Rican who couldn't punch? Can't remember his name now, but they just get into beautiful rhythms, and because the opponents maybe haven't got the punching power to turn things around, they snake charm guys over 12 rounds. I think that's a fair assessment.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. In terms of Muay if we are playing devil's advocate here, like how does Muay actually win this fight? Because I think, most people think he's not going to outbox Cruz. I feel like um, there's so many fights which have been previewed like this where it's like some guys is quite evidently the better boxer. You know, but again, is when you're facing someone who's just a better boxer than you, do you have to just fight ugly basically? Do you have to try to make it a street fight? I mean, from what I've seen from Muay he can box. He has got some skill, but he doesn't sound. It's fair to say from what I've seen so far, he hasn't got the skill of Andy Cruz. So it's like, what does he kind of do? If he tries to box with Cruz, you think he more than likely he's going to come off second best, unless there's some other intangibles there. Um, but then again, he doesn't seem, from what I've seen so far, to be like an ugly fighter either. So yeah, I mean, what does Muratalla win do here really? What's his game plan? Do you reckon for this one?
Well, yeah, I think what you said at the end is correct. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's going to suddenly go Orlando Salido, and maybe that's what you need to disrupt the rhythm of someone like an Andy Cruz and get stuck into him and grab him and hold him. But he hasn't shown to be that kind of fighter throughout his career, and he's got Robert Garcia in the corner who will have done his homework. So you have to think that they're going to have some, a solid game plan. And Morataya's just got to back himself and shots together nicely, particularly with the left hook. He throws a lovely left hook to the head and the body. He's got fast hands. But I think one of the sort of standouts recently, and every fighter's going to have a sort of off night and have guys who give them trouble. But I thought the Tevin Farmer fight showed quite a lot about Muay someone who throws in combinations can cause him issues. Muay he whips in these very fast shots from nice angles, actually. He's got good shot selection, good
Mhm,
variety to his punches.
mhm,
And in the Zor Abdullayev fight, Abdullayev is a good sort of standard European boxer, very straight up and down, no special effects, good jab, doesn't really do anything out of the ordinary. And whenever he stood there like a statue, Muay said, "Thanks very much. I'm faster hands, faster feet than you. I'll just rip off the shots and hit you constantly." And that's what he did. But if you notice in that fight, whenever Abdullayev let the flurries go, he actually landed quite a bit. I mean, that's a clear strategy for Andy Cruz really to follow up on, to punch in fours and fives and sixes and punch with Muratalla. And I think that it's going to be very difficult for Muratalla to win that kind of battle because stylistically they're quite similar fighters. And I don't think he
mhm.
has in him now after 23 fights to get there and get ugly. So he's just going to have to back himself and just maybe try it. It could be cagey, They both could stand off and say, "I'm the counter puncher, you lead." Muratalla is the champion. He could say, "You're going to have to come into my yard and sort of make me lead." But I think Cruz will get him to throw. And once he starts throwing, they throw together. You'd have to think Cruz would have the skill to land the shots first. And it's going to be difficult for Muratalla to beat him at that game, I think.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I forgot that Robert Garcia is in Murata's corner. I think it's a trainer we all rate quite highly. Obviously, he can only do what he's got in front of him. He's got a very talented fighter in front of him. But that's intriguing. That's intriguing. I mean, I think if we're doing the battle of the trainers, correct me if I'm wrong. Andy Cruz still with the Ennis team, right? He's still with
Mm.
Bozy. I'm not overly convinced of Bozy sometimes. I like how Jack Catterall um, performed last time. I thought he looked quite aggressive for his standards, actually. I know Jack Carroll's there with Bozy and the Ennis team. But generally,
Mm.
with Boots, I've seen like sometimes some questionable tactics. I guess, yeah. I mean, is it fair to say that if we're going off the trainers, I think Muratai's definitely got the better man in his corner here, who's going to come up with probably a better game plan than Bozy probably.
I think so. I'm not a fan of really of Bosley, to be honest with you. He's quite a sort of irascible character. He's quite. I think it's one of the cases of maybe it's an Andre Ward, Virgil Hunter kind of scenario. I don't know, but you can't really say Bo Mac Crawford because Bo Mac has had success elsewhere. But sometimes Bosley, they like see him, I look at him and think, does the fighter sort of make the trainer? And Duran is like a sort of, he looks like to me like he's potentially a generational talent. Bosley had the other two brothers as well, did
Mm,
okay with them. definitely gets people whipped up in good shape in that Philadelphia dungeon. But there's been moments where I don't know, he's sort of a little bit lost. I think it's the current rematch, if memory serves me correctly, when he was literally round after round just saying, "Come on, man, you've got to go out there and beat this guy up and throw punches and get rid of this guy." He was saying the same thing over and over again. He wasn't really giving him any tactical
Mhm.
instructions. And a fight like Ennis maybe doesn't need that, and Cruz could be the same. He may be that good that he just needs basic overview and just very minimal instructions and to be kept on task. Some fighters are like that, rather than go out to this, go out and do that, and detailed instructions. So maybe Bosey is the best man for him to sort of just keep getting fit, get him on weight, giving them a basic tactical instructions and let the natural ability shine through. But I mean, he's definitely made a smooth transition from amateur to pro, as Cruz has. And you have to think maybe Bosey is responsible for that when you're going from Olympic gold medalist to a potential professional world champion in just your seventh fight. Then Bosey's responsible for helping that transition. And I'm not sure what the thinking was for sort of sending him off to Philadelphia. Um, why they didn't pick the sort of traditional Florida, Vegas. They have the sort of
Mm.
traditional Cuban roots. Philadelphia seems to have worked out well for him, and I think Cruz is just such a nice rhythm fighter. And as I mentioned before, he throws with opponents, so he will have success here. If he reaches the target before Muratalla, then maybe Bosey won't have to do too much tactical instructions to help him along the way.
No, that's a good point. And I guess sometimes when you're a fighter with so much experience like Andy Cruz, I mean, arguably you maybe don't need, there's nothing really that can be taught. I mean, arguably in the gym anyway. What I would say though is that where the best trainers come in is, on fight night, is that fight management when things, aren't going to plan. That's when I think, that's where they deserve, the big bucks, the trainers. I was reading, Sugar Ray Leonard's autobiography, and he had Angelo Dundee in the corner, who was obviously Ali's trainer as well. And the impression I get from reading about that is that you know the top trainers they're not necessarily teaching you things, but on the fight night they're the ones that are going to really maybe be the difference between winning and losing. And with Bosey in the corner, I'm not sure if he's got that in him, to be honest. If he has that ability to kind of, give that instruction like we're talking about to change a fight around. But like we're saying, it might not be needed in this one for Cruz, maybe because Cruz is just going to be too much for Muratalla. I mean, on top of Muratalla, having it against him, he's also going to be technically the away fighter here. I feel like I always mention this, but I mean, we see it time and time again that the home fighter always gets the rub of the green. Does Muay need a knockout, a few knockdowns to to get a win here on points?
He might do. I'm not sure that plays in as much. I know Matchroom won the purse bids and all, but they're basically putting him in Las Vegas. Moritayo, I think, is a California fighter, so he'll probably have more. Well, he'll have more support than Cruz in there on the night, and you'd expect the Las Vegas Commission experience to sort of know the dynamics of what's playing out there enough to score it fairly. I would imagine on this occasion, I'd probably say no. I don't really feel concerned with home and away. I think
Mhm.
they're both in an equal position, and even though Matchroom's the home promoter technically unless they're pulling shenanigans. It's more a tires sort of area. I mean, I'm just bringing up his box right now and having a look quickly. I'm sure he's fought in Vegas. He fought Tevin Farmer in Vegas. Yeah, he fought Nakathila in Vegas in the bubble. He's fought in Vegas before Vegas, but all day, yeah, he fought like four fights in Vegas early in his career. I don't see that being too much of an issue. I'd say it'd be home from home for him and he'll have good support. And I trust the commission on this one. I don't think that'll be a factor.
Okay, fair enough. That's good. That's good then. So that's good to be honest, because that means we're just going to be like kind of a fair fight, and both fighters can kind of just implement their game plan, and it's just who's going to be the better man's going to win. And I hope that is the case. And if he's fought in Las Vegas before and he's got support there, then that can influence judges as well in his favor. So that's good to hear. I'm glad that that seems to be the case. Yeah, let the best man win, basically. We
Yeah.
touched on it before, but for the winner, I guess it's a good division lightweight. I think like it's always been quite good, to be honest. Davis, we don't know what's going on with Gervonta Davis. I mean, the guy's got criminal charge after criminal charge. I mean, the guy, I don't know, the guy arguably maybe should just retire at this point. He's just whether to go, but maybe he needs boxing to just stay on some sort of narrow path, whatever that is. But Davis, I don't know. He does. I can't see him really volunteering to fight Cruz or I don't know. Muratalla depends. I don't know, but I couldn't see Davis opting to fight Cruz. I feel like he wants just the easiest possible fight. But I could see Abdullah Mason definitely, or Abdullah Mason or Schofield definitely stepping up to that kind of fight. I think both men they're both young guys, but they both kind of come across quite old school. Um, so what do you think about a potential fight against Abdullah Mason or I mean the winner potentially fighting Abdullah Mason or Floyd Schofield?
Yeah, I think if the deal can be done, that's the kind of thing they'll be looking for. You're right to bet Javante Davis. I think it's such a shame from a career point of view. He's just absolutely wasting his career. I honestly firmly believe he was the best of the bunch of them all, even Shakur. I thought he would beat a lot of them. He's just sort of just turned into a wayward human being, and I think he will fight again, Davis. But as you said, the fact he was willing to take that Jake Paul fight and that he's just after money fights and weird fights, and he'll turn up here and there and disappear for 18 months and he's on the run at the moment, and he's just a despicable human being. I mean, it's just there's no hope. Well, I mean, there's always hope, but I mean, at the moment, it's just like, what is he doing with his life as well as his boxing career? He's just wasted his talent and he's wasting all of his abilities. But I'm basically I'm writing him off now and forgetting about him. He won't entertain the likes of Andy Cruz. That's not the type of fight that he'll be interested in. But
Mhm.
Mason, absolutely, Abdullah Mason's there, as you mentioned. Floyd Schofield was supposed to have a fight recently. I can't remember who he was fighting. Then he pulled out, but he's definitely on the upward trajectory. If Oscar can keep his sort of head together and all, we've got the Virgil Ortiz issue going on there. I see Cruz on BoxRec is the second ranked Cuban at the weight. He's not even the first. Jadier Herrera, who won the title last week against Nunes, is the first. But Herrera looks very raw, and I don't see any clamour for an all Cuban matchup. And Frank Warren putting that guy in against someone like Cruz. Cruz is a difficult guy to match, but now he's got a title. People will be more inclined to fight him, but I can't see them queuing up. I'll tell you who he might end up fighting. There's a guy down in the rankings at 13 on the box rate rankings here, Albert Bell, who's
Mm,
28 and 0. He has been in a contender status for goodness knows how long. No promoter will touch him for some reason. He's quite a negative fighter, but he's very talented. As
mhm,
I say, 28 and 0. He's in the early 30s. He's highly ranked with the IBF. He's actually a place above Cruz on the box rate rankings. I could see him being dragged in for maybe a long overdue mandatory if Cruz were to get hold of the title. Guys like Dos Santos, Lucas Bardi,
mhm.
just keep him moving nice and quickly. Just keep Cruz moving and get him into those unifications because he's not getting any younger. I'm acting like he's automatically won the fight here. Obviously, this could all be the same for Muratalla. And what would Top Rank do with him if he were to win this fight? I mean, I don't know how they would match him. I mean, they haven't even got a TV deal, so you would
Mm,
imagine Cruz would get the belt and then sort of start looking at these options and opportunities. But it's a bit of a division in flux at the moment. Guys are kind of moving out the way, and that leaves opportunities for the people who are still there.
yeah, and it's a big shame about Davis. I mean, yeah, I mean, the Stevenson fight that should have happened. That's probably never going to happen, and that's a real shame. From what I checked
Mm.
today, Stevenson still holds, I think, the WBC title despite going up. That's what it says on one of the boxing ranking websites. I don't know if there's some sort of deal there or something like that. So Stevenson, if he doesn't win against Teofimo, he might still be floating around lightweight as well. Um,
Mm.
I want to just touch on Eddie Hearn here a little bit because could this be kind of a bit of a, I don't know, comeback for Eddie Hearn a little bit because I think it's fair to say he hasn't had many world champions in recent years. And obviously we had the Dalton Smith win last week. If he gets another world champion here, this could be like a little bit of a, yeah, a bit of a comeback. Well, what do you think about Eddie Hearn in terms of like, because I think there is a perception that he's kind of been a little bit on the decline in recent years. Hasn't really had many world titles, hasn't had the same kind of cash cows doing well for him like previously. Like one point, Eddie Hearn was the man, wasn't he, with Joshua, obviously Froch when he first started. But yeah, look, Dalton Smith wins a world title, Cruz wins a world title, then all of a sudden he's got two world champions and he can kind of, start making more money off them and making more money overall. Is that something to think about? I guess the somewhat comeback of Eddie Hearn. Could Cruz be, I guess, another part of that jigsaw, I suppose?
He could possibly be. Eddie's in a strange place at the moment. I'm not sure because you mentioned those guys, and he was riding the crest of a wave recently, really early in his career. He's a great hype man, Eddie. He's a fantastic promoter. I mean, he does work very hard. Can't deny any of that. But from bringing guys from grassroots, from the ground level upwards to fighters. I don't think he's the best at that. A lot of the guys he picked up, your Frotches and all, I know he did it with Joshua, Olympic gold medalist and that, but your Frotches sort of built up by Mick Hennessy. Mick just couldn't get him over to that next level. Eddie was perfect for Frotch. There was the perfect combination. And he had all these world champions, Kell Brook as well. He was able to just hype them into fights, and he was, he did brilliant back then. But I think he struggled in recent years. Hasn't really found his niche. Joshua's sort of on the way out. Obviously, has his own issues. Eddie's sort of half a foot out of sport for me. I think. I think
Mm,
Matchroom Australia is going to fold up. I don't think he's interested in that anymore. He's got the likes of Sky and all that still hanging around. Opetaya's gone off to this Zuffa boxing. I wouldn't be surprised if Bam Rodriguez. I think he's a free agent. He might end up over there as well. Hitchens, I don't think he's contracted to Matchroom anymore. But as you mentioned, Dalton Smith's good for a comeback to Sheffield. Get a promotion out of him. Cruz, he feels like the Cuban guys. They don't feel like they've got sort of their feet. Like I know David Morrell he sort of found a home in Minnesota and had the fan base, but Cruz feels like a bit of a nomad to me. Like he hasn't got roots anywhere really, being the Cuban. Like Dalton
mm,
Smith different. He has like a home and they can take him back and he can defend. Cruz feels like a guy who's sort of always flitting around on the road, maybe looking to, even if he's a champion, sort of have a B, an A side or like a hometown fighter to sort of play with, like almost like he's not going to
yeah,
be the A side kind of guy. And I think where Joshua, he was the cash cow in Wembley, come to me, and all the champions did. Same with the likes of Brook and all these other Frotch and all these other guys that he had. Whereas Ed, it's very much like Eddie himself and Matchroom USA, kind of just wandering around at the moment aimlessly. And I wouldn't be surprised if say if he closes up Matchroom Australia, Matchroom America seems to be flitting along at the moment, and he just sort of, I don't know, reduces everything in size a little bit and maybe focuses. It'd be nice to see him focus back on the UK and sort of get guys there again. Now that the Saudi experiments and Zuffa are going to start hoovering up guys, and he's in a funny place, Eddie. It'd be interesting to see what he does next. Not sure about the resurgence, but I mean, he's definitely, if Cruz can win this title, he's definitely back sort of on the ascendancy again.
no, I mean that's a good point about Jai Bataille. That's a bad lot. That's a quite a big loss to be fair. But I guess he didn't get Jai Bataille the fights he wanted, and that's not bad. I think that's Eddie's fault. I think just no one wants to fight Jai Bataille, to be honest. Um, and yeah, Bam Rodriguez is a big loss as well if he goes. Hitchens, yeah, fair. I didn't actually think about that part of the jigsaw. I suppose he's. It sounds like he's losing high profile world champions and gaining a couple less high profile world champions. If he'd have kept all
Mm.
of them, then yeah, maybe it would have been a resurgence. All right, see, let's finish off with just our prediction. I'll go first. No surprises. Gonna go for Cruz. I'm gonna go on points. I just feel like Muratalla is gonna be tough. He's gonna give him maybe something to think about, but ultimately Cruz is gonna be just a little bit too good. Maybe 8-4, 9-3, something like that. I'm envisaging. What about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. I think unanimous decision. Don't maybe a majority. I'd say unanimous decision. I think yeah, 116, 112, those kind of scorecards. Cruz just wins a few more rounds, just a little bit more clearly. Very, very similar to yourself.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, guys, that's our episode. As always, thanks a lot for listening. If you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe. Thanks a lot to Steve for joining me again. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.